there a motion to move into exec?
I'll make a motion.
And it's been seconded. All in favor, say aye. Aye. Any opposed? Seeing none. All right. Senator Waters? There he is. Hey, we're in exec. Welcome.
I'm sorry, a couple minutes late.
That's fine. There, 1420. That is, I think we all agreed that holding off on some of these applications until. Do you remember this one? This bill prohibits issues of new landfill permits under state solid waste plan until their plan is updated. This bill also prospectively repeals prohibitions when final update of solid waste plan is published. And
So, Mr. Chairman, I believe I had an amendment on that.
yep,
Or maybe I decided we didn't need it. We don't need the amendment. I don't think we do.
I did have some. The Secretary of State's final publication. What action after published? That was just my.
Yeah, I don't think, I was gonna take the word final out, but we don't need to.
Okay. So is there a motion on this bill?
Excuse me, Mr. Chairman, let's take the word final out if we could.
Okay, so Daley?
Be less confusion. So I'll move a committee amendment to remove the word final.
Final publication on page 1 with line 11?
Yeah.
Or second, you see that right here? Yeah, we're just gonna strike the word final. Just, it'll be a committee amendment. Do you see that? Yeah.
You'll see that I have, it is amendment 1211S, if we want to do it that way, but it is going to be a committee amendment anyway, so.
So, do you want to?
I'll just move 1211S.
All right, so Senator Waters moves 1211S.
This is it. The 1211S.
It's the same way either way.
Same darn thing.
1211S.
Yeah. Make it official. All right, further discussion. All in favor of passing HB 1420 FN?
Well, that's the only amendment. And, I'll
the
say
amendment.
aye on the amendment.
Aye on the
Aye.
amendment.
I'll move 1420 ought to pass.
As amended.
Okay,
Second.
As amended.
and all in favor?
Aye.
And any opposed? Seeing none.
Okay.
All right, it's passed. OTPA, yeah. Senator Waters will take this one out.
Okay.
I would like discussion quickly on 1454. Really don't like this one. This had to do with spot areas of water migration and all that.
The formula for the setback.
Yeah, I just think it needs more work than anything, and I don't think now's the time to keep moving the goalpost in the middle of in midstream. And I think this, at best, interim study. But I'll entertain any emotion that you have.
Well, can I just make a comment before we
Sure.
have a motion? Mr. Chairman, so we do have House Bill 1049.
Yep.
And I did think that no matter what we do on this bill, it would be worthwhile when we have that hearing to have language that directs this committee to study the issue of groundwater.
Yeah.
And I will have, by the time we get to that, some language that sets the kind of parameters and uses the right terminology scientifically as to what we're asking them to do.
So in the spirit of what this wants to do,
Yeah, so
in
that would be no matter what we do in this bill, that would be represented there.
Right.
Now, on the one at hand, 1454, I understand the issues about it. I think we're in a way replaying the votes we had. I'm sorry. On 1454, I think we are in some ways replaying the and likely to replay the debate on the floor that we had last year. Whatever motion anybody wants to make, I think that I'm likely to, kind of vote no, and we'll play it out on the floor, and we'll see if there is any change there. But that's just kind of the way where I am on it.
Okay.
And I just have a quick comment, which is to say I think we got some good feedback in the hearing that there was some language here that still need to be adjusted, but I don't see an amendment to do that from anyone. So I agree with Senator Waters that studying this further is a good move at this point.
Or death.
I think it might, I wonder if we're going to see I don't know if we're going to see this on a Senate bill or not, no matter what we do.
Right.
But I think interim study might be just easier for us.
Is that your motion?
Well, what's appropriate?
I don't know. I mean, Mr.
So,
Chairman, you're.
my chair, I would like to ITL it.
Okay, then make the motion.
And we interim studied the other one, and we still, had a big Donnybrook on it here and there. So I think this is just, it just needs more work, and we're gonna be working on groundwater, as Senator Waters did talk about. So I think my gut says ITL, if somebody would make a motion. And I'll back you up on it.
Yeah. You head into the cannonade and I'll be right behind you. What is the reason we're delaying? We're not going to address this because we want more information, right? So
Senator Guida, you might want to turn your microphone on.
Yeah, and I think that some of the language just a lot of this isn't workable, and from my humble opinion, relatively arbitrary, and I just don't think it's ready for prime time. I can't support it, and as concerned as I am, because we're going to be hearing some bills on groundwater.
Right.
Yeah.
Are we studying this at all in another bill? I didn't put my hearing aids in today. so-
Potentially in
yeah.
1049.
In 1049.
Yeah, we could add the groundwater issue as part of the study in 1049. I hope, no matter what we do in this bill, I hope we will do that. And I will have an amendment to that effect.
Yeah, we'll make a commitment to do that, because groundwater is definitely a huge issue. So.
All right, I'll move ITL.
Okay, is there a second?
Come on, Dave.
No, I'm just gonna be where I am, so.
All right, so I'll second it. And all in favor of ITL?
Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay. All right, ITL, I'll take it up.
And for the record, with the proviso that 1049 is going
Yes.
to pick up groundwater and run with it.
All right, so it is 10:30, and is there a motion to move out of exec?
So moved.
All right.
Second.
All in favor, aye?
Aye.
So our first bill that we're going to be hearing is HB 1547 FN, and we'll hear from the prime sponsor. Welcome.
Thank you.
This is a fun committee.
Yeah. We have fun with house
We have
bills.
fun. This is the fun committee.
We have fun with house bills.
Yeah, with House. Representative, you have the floor.
Thank you so much, Mr. Chairman and senators on the committee. For the record, my name is Maureen Mooney. I'm a state representative from the town of Merrimack. That's in Hillsborough County, district number 21. I've provided a written copy of my testimony to your assistant, so I'm sure you'll all be getting that soon, and I'm going to be using this as a guiding point. I want to be sure every word I say today is meaningful and as clear as possible. I am the prime sponsor and in support of House Bill 1547 as it has come to you amended by the House. I want to be very clear on that point. The original language of this bill in the House has been completely amended, and that is the bill that got to you, and that is the bill I am speaking in favor of today. The bill, as amended by the House, was adopted unanimously by the House Environment and Agriculture Committee, and then the full House on the consent calendar on February 16, 2022. It was then unanimously adopted by the House Finance Division 2 Committee, and then the full House again on the consent calendar on March 31, 2022. To provide some background on House Bill 1547, it came from a brainstorming meeting consisting of community activists and legislators in Merrimack. Merrimack has suffered the worst fluorofluorochemical pollution in the state's history caused by a private polluter. These pollutants have infiltrated water, air, and soil. The bill originally was meant to monitor soil by placing maximum levels of contaminants, but while in extensive conversations with the New Hampshire Department of the New Hampshire Department of Environmental Services, the amended bill is far more practical. The bill is in 3 parts. Part 1, it allows the Commissioner of NHDES to initiate rules for soil remediation standards for fluorofluorochemicals by November 1st, 2023. This carefully chosen date is a prime reason for this bill. The United States Geological Survey, USGS, is performing a study in New Hampshire of its soil due by the fall of 2022. That study, the results of that study are going to be critical, crucial to setting soil standards in New Hampshire. Part 1. Second part of the bill amends the Groundwater Protection Act rulemaking section, which is found in RSA 485-C:4, Roman 8, to add soil to that section. Never been added before. Additionally, in Section 2 of the bill, adding that a person liable for such contamination of the soil provides safe alternative water to an impacted well owner. And I have checked with multiple sources, including our RSAs. The word person in the law includes companies and private or public corporations as well, and that's in RSA 485:C:2. Brings us to the third part of the bill, which is sections 3 through 7. These sections clarify language describing certification requirements for certain hazardous waste generators to avoid confusion and maintain consistency, primarily between state terminology on this point and federal terminology on this point. Once those revisions are made in sections 3 through 7, the language, the terms will be consistent and avoid confusion. In consultation with the New Hampshire Department of Environmental Services, there are no fiscal impacts on state revenues or expenditures. Additionally, there is a potential decrease in expenditures for local governments. In closing, I just want to add, this bill, as well as another one I'll introduce this morning, has received considerable attention from college students in our state, and I'm proud of that fact. In fact, some are here today. One interviewed me regarding this bill and then sent a letter of support on the House side, and I just want to read from her letter something that summarizes this bill. She said, "The collaboration between the town of Merrimack, New Hampshire legislators and the Department of Environmental Services highlights how all parties impacted were considered in the crafting of this bill. It is holistic, it is evidence-based, and it can help those who have been harmed." coming from a college student's interpretation of this bill and its background regarding the collaboration between activists in town, state legislators, our state senator, and the New Hampshire Department of Environmental Services. With that, I will conclude my testimony, and I would ask this committee for an ought to pass recommendation, and I thank you for your attention.
Well done, Representative. Questions from the committee? Seeing none, thank you very much. Oh, Senator Waters with a question.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank you. So I just wanted to touch base on this issue that we had another PFAS bill come in and that seemed to raise some questions about whether it was reopening the settlement with
Yes.
St. Cobain. Is there any sense that this would do that?
This bill is not related to that topic at all.
Okay.
In fact,
We're
the
good.
only,
We're good. Thank you. All right.
okay.
Thank you. Well done. Representative Pearl. In support and wishing to speak. Welcome, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And for the record, my name is Representative Howard Pearl, representing Merrimack 26. I'm going to take about 10 seconds of your time. I just wanted to come over as the Chair of Environment and Ag and encourage you to support the bill. Representative Mooney's done a wonderful job in explaining all the details, and they did come out of our committee with an amendment and went on the consent calendar with a 17-0 recommendation, so I would encourage you to support as well. Thank you.
Any questions from the committee? Seeing none. All right. And at the representatives, Representative Johnson in support, not wishing to speak. Sabrina Ram is in support, doesn't indicate whether she wants to speak. So Mike Wimsatt from the Department of New Hampshire Department of Environmental Services. In support and wishing to speak. Welcome.
Morning, Mr. Chairman, members of the committee. For the record, my name is Mike Wimsatt, Service Director of the Waste Management Division for the New Hampshire Department of Environmental Services. And with me today is Wendy Bonner, who serves in our Hazardous Waste Management Bureau as our Chief Rulemaking Person and Policy Person for the Bureau. If we have any questions specifically about Section 3 of the bill, Wendy is the person to direct them to. So we appreciate the opportunity to be here to testify in support of House Bill 1547 this morning. We strongly support this bill, and Representative Mooney has done a good job of explaining the various sections. I'll just quickly summarize our support. Section 1, which directs DES to do rulemaking specific to the application of some key environmental statutes as it relates to PFAS contamination. And I think everyone knows now that PFAS contamination is a very unique contaminant, or group of contaminants that have had really an outsized impact on literally the drinking water of tens of thousands of people in New Hampshire over the last 8 years. So this bill, in addition to directing DES to develop soil standards for the 4 PFAS compounds that we currently regulate in groundwater and drinking water, it would direct us and give us the authority to essentially do some rulemaking that would specifically address how we regulate PFAS in the context of our overarching environmental statutes to ensure that we acknowledge the unique characteristics. And basically what we think will happen is that because of the problem that these contaminants have created, being able to do that in rulemaking and approach these specifically in rulemaking will allow us to acknowledge the outsized impacts this has had on municipalities and small businesses, and try to make sure that while we ensure that the rules that we may make to address PFAS are protective of human health and protective of drinking water, but they also acknowledge the unique characteristics and such that we can ensure that we try to minimize the financial impacts that are occurring, particularly for our municipalities. As Representative Mooney indicated, we are working with USGS right now to do some studies of soil and PFAS in soil. Those studies are going very well. They're on schedule. And we believe with the information that we will get from those studies will position us to develop the soil standards that we're directed to make. by November of 2023. Section 2 of the bill essentially amends the Groundwater Protection Act to clarify our existing authority to establish soil standards to protect both human health and drinking water quality, and also gives us, clarifies and makes more explicit the agency's authority to require responsible persons who have contaminated a person's drinking water well to provide safe alternate water to the impacted well owners. And then finally, in Section 3, this section changes the hazardous waste management statute in the state to align the nomenclature that we use to describe generators of hazardous waste, the businesses that produce hazardous waste in the state, with the federal terms. It does not change in any way the responsibilities of those generators. It doesn't really give them any more work to do. What it does is it helps to address this inconsistency in the nomenclature that we've used for years. It has created a lot of confusion, in particular for companies that do business not only in New Hampshire but in other states, because they have to familiarize themselves with the specific nomenclature in New Hampshire, and they're a little bit, they're misaligned, and it's created problems. So we think what this will do is really just make our hazardous waste rules much more user-friendly, eliminate that inconsistency, and eliminate the confusion associated with it. And I'll leave it at that, and we'll be happy to answer any of your questions.
I think Senator Guida has a question.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you, Mike. On Roman 27, line 21, on the first page of the bill as amended by the House, you strike small quantity hazardous waste generator. You strike the small quantity out.
That's correct.
The question I have is, will that create a one-size-fits-all that could potentially impact a small quantity person by putting them into perhaps a higher level of compliance or remediation or something?
No, it makes absolutely no change to the responsibilities or the categories. It's really just a nomenclature issue. Right now, the federal government would call them what we call a small quantity generator, a very small quantity generator. And the problem is that their definition of small quantity generator, just the terminology they use, is a larger generator than that. So what this will do is just align the nomenclature so that, particularly for businesses that manage hazardous waste in a variety of states, we'll be basically singing from the same hymnal. When we use a term, everyone will know what it means.
Thank you.
Senator Perkins Coker.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. And thank you for being here. I know that on P's, soil remediation related to PFAS has created a lot of uncertainty in development, and so I know that this was sort of an ongoing issue. Is part of the intent here to create certainty and predictability for development and redevelopment, as an example, for how we would remediate soil affected by PFAS?
Sure. So, and again, as I indicated, what this really does is clarify and the existing authorities. We believe we already possess the authority to make soil standards. We've been doing it for years. We've gone through rulemaking. We've set soil standards for a host of contaminants. What makes PFAS different is that because they behave so uniquely, and they are regulated at such low concentrations in drinking water, down in, right now we regulate PFOA at 12 parts per trillion. It's a very low standard. We have very few, really no compounds that have standards that low. What it means is that we need to take a little bit more sophisticated approach to developing those soil standards, and that's why we engaged USGS, because we needed to understand what's the distribution of PFAS in soils across the state. And we actually did the first stage of their study was to look at 100 soil samples in the state in locations where we don't have any reason to believe there's a nearby local source of PFAS. So what we're really looking at is global transport with the rains up PFAS, and we know that happens. You know, we can find PFAS in polar bear blood. So really, that's the first step. We've got that, and that data is going to be released soon. So we'll know what the background concentration, if you will, from airborne transport globally is. That helps to inform us and kind of give us a gauge for where we need to be on this. But then we were further doing laboratory samples. We collected soil samples from a variety of different soil types. And we're not sure where it's going to lead to because the work isn't done yet. But once the laboratory work is done to see how PFAS behave in different soils and soil types. And then the third phase is to look at actual sites where PFAS have been released here in the state. So we're studying a few of those sites with field studies. With that data, we'll try to figure out whether we can set a uniform soil standard like we do for most contaminants to protect groundwater, or whether we actually might end up setting standards based on the soil type. So a site that had a particular soil type might have a different standard than when it comes to protecting groundwater than maybe a site with another soil type, because this, in one site, the PFAS might not leach into the groundwater as easily because of the soil type. So that's a long answer to your question, but that's essentially why we're doing this in a very sophisticated way. We're taking our time, we're spending the necessary resources to get this information in concert with USGS. And then at the end of the day, whenever we set a soil standard, it has two functions. One is to make sure that anybody, including children who might come in contact with that soil on the site, isn't going to have a health risk associated with that. And then the other one is to make sure that the concentrations in the soil don't pose a risk to the underlying groundwater on that site through leaching of the contaminants.
And just one follow-up, if I may, Chair. Thank you. And I think you essentially answered this in your question, in your answer, because you were talking about sites that have come in contact with PFAS, but these remediation standards would include sites that have experienced sludge spreading, I would assume.
Sure, I appreciate the question, because actually the USGS's work includes that. We're actually looking at biosolids samples for PFAS and how PFAS behaves in that. And we're also looking at an actual site where biosolids have been applied in the past, and looking at PFAS contamination and how it moves at that particular site. So yes, it will inform that work very clearly.
Okay.
So
Thank you,
sludge
Chair.
contains PFAS?
Yeah, well, unfortunately, PFAS are in so many consumer products that, even the waste, for people who have a septic system, if we were to go and take a sample from their septic tank, we will find PFAS. That's the ubiquitous nature of these. So if you think about it, the people who are connected to a sewer system, their wastewater goes to a wastewater plant. The wastewater plant really doesn't have any specific treatment procedures that will treat PFAS. So some portion of it ends up in the treated effluent that gets discharged to a river in most cases, and another significant portion of it ends up in the sludge. And some sludge is managed by sending it to a landfill, but some sludge is processed to create a biosolid product that can be land applied for agricultural purposes. That's a whole nother, and if that's something we can explore certainly at any time if it's of interest, because Anthony Druin, who works in our residuals management program, has been working full-time and overtime on this for a few years. We've got a lot of work going on this.
So I have two questions. This doesn't have anything to do with Saint-Gobain, correct?
The bill is not targeted at Saint-Gobain, if that's what you're asking.
Yeah.
Right? It would apply how we look at PFAS across the state. And it needs to be said that while that site is an incredibly significant site, it's impacted thousands of people's drinking water, we have many, many other sites. We have Pfas, and we have manufacturing facilities that have contaminated groundwater or soil at their sites as a result of their use of PFAS.
So sludge contains that. So for years, they've been putting sludge off the highway, off exit 17 for years in the field to fertilize the field, which runs right next to the river, which also is the same river that goes to Nashua, which Nashua draws from drinking water. Okay, I'm not even going to have you comment on that. Thank you very much. It's just my little squirrel's going is like, whoa.
Well, you just drew what we would call a conceptual model for how contaminants migrate and how they're transported. And so not to in any way trivialize it, we're looking at that very closely. We do have a number of sites that have impacted groundwater, and we're looking at that. And essentially what this work that USGS is doing will help us to develop standards for the land application of biosolids, so that in the same way that we regulate a host of other contaminants in biosolids, we would be able to set a standard and say biosolids that contain less than X parts per billion of PFAS may be considered safe for land application, but if they're over that standard, they would have to be managed in another way or treated in some fashion to reduce those concentrations. That's the vision for moving forward.
Okay. Wendy, do you have anything to say?
Excuse me, only in response to questions.
Okay, that's it?
Yep.
Well done. All right, we're on a time crunch. Thank you, Mike. Any further questions? Seeing none, really appreciate your testimony. I am up against, I got a few more bills to go, and the House sent us a lot of bills, so there are any House representatives in here. We just want to let you know that we really appreciate all these bills you're sending us. So anyway.
Get it done.
Representative Rung, could I trouble you to just get right to the point?
I am.
Yeah, thank you. And I don't mean to be rude, but I think there's only Chris, what? But you will if I have to, yeah.
Thank you very much, Senator, and thank you, committee. It's nice to be here for PFAS Day. For the record, my name is Rosemary Rung, and I'm a state representative for Hillsborough 21, which encompasses the town of Merrimack. I just want to make 2 points. I've emailed you my written testimony. I provided it here. The 2 important points about this bill is, one, it allows DES the opportunity to test for all PFAS. What we've seen with technology is companies are altering the molecule of PFOA, PFAS, the regulated PFAS. They alter them in such a way that it becomes a different molecule, which is not subject to regulation. So by allowing DES to have the opportunity to test for all PFAS, they can stay at the same pace as technology and changes in the industry. So that's a plus. We're not just restricted to the 4 that are regulated. It allows DS to enter into other ones. And the other important point is we've never been able to really look at soil, PFAS in soil, and help regulate it. And the reason that is so critically important that we do it is soil is the source for much of the groundwater contamination that we see. I want you to imagine that you're home. And this has actually happened to me, where I've spilled a gallon of paint. You clear up the edges of the paint where it's spread, but the best way to control is to go to the root, to go to where the bulk of the source of that contamination is. If you can reduce that, you're going to reduce the negative impacts that that's causing to groundwater and spread. And because PFAS doesn't degrade naturally, by getting to the source, we're much more efficient in mitigating and preventing further groundwater contamination. So I respectfully request that you support this bill with an ought to pass recommendation. And I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Any questions? Seeing none.
Okay, did I do okay?
You did good.
Thank you.
And I really appreciate the brevity because we are on a severe time crunch. I have nobody else here to speak on this bill. I know Kristen Koch from BIA in opposition, not wishing to speak. And with that, I'm going to close the hearing on HB 1547. Thank you very much. So with that, we're going to hear the prime sponsor, 1584. Hello, Mr. Prime.
Oh, thank you very much,
are
Mr.
you?
Chair and members of the committee.
Welcome.
Yes, it's, I think the first time I've been in this one. I've testified many times before the person to your left there.
Uh-huh.
And the person to your right as well. And the person to the right has wonderful gas prices in this town up there. So, Representative Guida, as you go by your service station up there where you get your gasoline in Warren, I'd like to know why their gallon is 30 cents cheaper than it is over in Haverhill, 8 miles down the road.
Because they're smarter.
Yeah, well, that's where I fill up. Well, thank you very much, Mr. Chair. I'm here. I represent Haverhill, which is Grafton 4, and I'm also chair of House Education, and I'm here to introduce 1584. I do have copies of my testimony here, which I will also provide copies. I'll pass those around. I don't know if there's more copies right here. I didn't know how many I gave you. This bill has been introduced after working with the directors of the North Haverhill Fair and speaking with directors and fairs elsewhere in the state. We have 13 statewide fairs. And we're looking at some of the issues associated with these fairs right now, capital improvements and maintaining these fairs. The fairs are definitely a part of our culture, a part of our state. They have a lot to do with our agriculture, economics, education, etc. And so we're looking at how can we help, seeing that right now, due to many of the changing of how we conduct ourselves at these fairs in terms of safety, of health, fire code, utilities that are needed, and support services within the fairgrounds for people visiting, many changes have had to occur. And these are expensive changes to comply with all these codes, and with the maybe bringing three-phase power into that to hook up all those trailers and campers and all that come to the fairs. So I did some research and tried to dig into and find out how that has been done in the past. How have we provided the support, or how have they gathered the dollars to support their capital needs? And I looked at the University, Plymouth State University, and the most recent information I could find was written back in 2002, where it was estimated that $40.6 million spent by visitors, exhibitors, and operators was impacted our state. $40+ million. So it is a viable industry in our state. Then a follow-up to that, in 2011, it shrunk to about $37 million. My question then was to the research people here in this building is to how we as a state supported the capital needs and facilities of these 13 fairs, which are part of the statewide fair association. And there's strict policies and guidelines that all these must follow as nonprofits. The issue became to where we used to get our money was Rockingham. From the parimutuel funds. There was a percentage that came out of Rockingham down at the track and all, which went to the state, and from that the state was allocating dollars out annually. And then on the second sheet you have, you can see the years in which these funds were available. Back in 1989, it was $145.5 thousand that came from the state in support. It shrunk during the latter part of the 80s when we were going through a little bit of a recession and all, $50,000. In 1979, going back further, you can see it was $275,000. When Rockingham closed, that source of revenue also closed and stopped. When I was traveling back to after our college hunting with a grandson, I stopped at the Welcome Center there outside of Rutland towards the New York border. And I was talking with a gal, and she said, "Where are you from? I want to list you down as what state you're from." I said, "I'm from New Hampshire." She said, "Oh, I'm going over to New Hampshire tomorrow. I'm going to Pike." I said, "Why are you going to Pike?" The North Haverhill Fair. And we are attracting people to our fairgrounds now from all over New England and even outside of New England. And it's a part of our history. It's part of where we're going. And in order to keep these fairs going, I then talked to the directors of the fair up there. How are you maintaining these fairs? And they said, "We're doing it through volunteer help. We're doing it through at this fairgrounds. In order to make this fair work for the last 3 or 4 days of July each year, it takes 300 volunteers. And they're also contributing funds themselves to make this work, and working with the fair directors to make these fairs come off, and we do a real great job in doing that. We have some fairs like Rochester had a barn burn down this previous year, right within the last several months. And unfortunately, that barn was an old facility, not insured. Everything else was insured, but now they're faced with how do we replicate what we had? North Haverhill is looking at how do we build a museum for our maple syrup and some of our old equipment and get that indoors. They're looking at putting that aside and trying to get into grounds of education and working with the kids in schools, bringing them in each year. So what we need to do as a state, if we want to maintain these fairs, because I don't know if the commissioner's walked in yet or not, Commissioner Jasper, he's very supportive of this bill, but he could tell you the history of where we've been with fairs and how many fairs have now gone by the wayside. And that's unfortunate. When you talk to some of our previous commissioners, like Commissioner Taylor, that they're an integral part of New Hampshire, and we don't want to lose that. And of course, when you're talking about the youngsters to get involved with the Future Farmers Association, 4-H, et cetera. There's a lot of impact in terms of our future and maintaining these fairs. So this bill recommends that there be $250,000 put aside, capped at that, and that the Commissioner of Agriculture, Commissioner Jasper, has authority through rulemaking to implement this process. There's also, as amended by the House, a portion which there's controls, audit controls, and looking at from the perspective that administrative services have the ability to make rules to look at the accountability and the accounting processes. So I think it's been really tightened up, and it's a bill that we need. I won't take any more time because I know there are others here that might want to speak, and I know you're a little bit behind schedule. So thank you. I'll take any questions.
We are way behind schedule, but I do have one question before you, Senator Gaeta. Do they qualify to receive money from charity gaming at all?
I don't believe they are. One of the things that, for example, the North Haverhill Fair has gotten away, they will not serve alcohol or that type of a beverage on the grounds, seeing that it is really for the kids, for the parents, and we're trying to keep it an alcohol-free. We don't get anything from the gaming either.
Okay, but yeah, maybe I'll ask the commissioner as far as if they qualify.
Oh, if they qualify,
Yeah.
that would be a commissioner question.
Yeah, and Senator Gaeta with a question.
Are you proposing these funds come out of the general fund, or do you have any ideas about possible sources of revenue?
I've been asked that question, but in fact, Senator Hennessy was quizzing me for a half hour, 45 minutes driving up the road last night. And she was in her car somewhere around me asking, where are we going to get this $3.3 million? Where are we going to get this and that? And I said, you guys are the gurus on the finance side. I believe that it could come out of the operating funds. It's got to come there. Yeah.
Senator.
You mentioned Rochester. Rochester is actually, the fair is done by the Rochester Agriculture and Mechanical Association, which does have shareholders, but is subject to statute way back, I think it was 1908. How would that affect this program that you're talking about with funds?
I don't know all the intricacies regarding how that would represent Gray. I can tell you that we're strapped. We're looking at every way to get resources for these fairs. In fact, during the winter months, you see the fairs are closed down. But within all these barns and these buildings, there is equipment being stored on a rental basis for those that go down to the Florida area and then come back, and all that stuff's right there for them. So we also have other groups that come and use the fairgrounds. There are resources coming, but we're not, and the fairgrounds are paying, where I am in Haverhill, they are paying their local share of taxes on those properties. They're not looking for any kind of a break from the community. So it doesn't pass the burden on to those taxpayers.
Thank you. Seeing no further questions, thank you very much for your testimony, Commissioner.
You're welcome.
You got a second to get up here? And I'm going to try to scoot as people as quickly as possible because I've got a couple more bills still and I'm behind schedule. So could you address that question that I have about the charity gaming? Can they qualify for that?
No, I cannot address that question.
Wonderful. Thank you very much for your brevity. All right.
Let me,
I have signed up to speak, but I know that Chairman Pearl is ahead, but I cannot address that question, so
Okay,
I'm sorry.
I'll get you. I know you are.
can I just follow up on that? Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you, Commissioner. So if we sent this to finance, would that give you time to work with some folks to address that issue?
I am sure I could
amendment.
find out. I wasn't sure. I didn't know there was any funding available through. Yeah, I would have to look into it. I don't have any knowledge of that area.
Thank you.
Well, there just seems to be an explosion of happiness with the charity gaming in New Hampshire. So I'm just thinking they're looking for places to put it, and if these are 501c3s or depending upon what they are, that might be an option for another source of revenue. That's just my question. But while you're sitting there, can you do your testimony?
Certainly. I am in support of this bill as I travel around the country and talk learn more. Really, all the other states that I'm aware of do put some level of support into their fairs. I mean, these are short events, which are, like agriculture in general, very dependent on the weather. If you could guarantee that every fair would have 3 days of sunny weather, then I probably wouldn't be here. But because that's not the reality, and we do see a lot of fairs that get either drowned out or sometimes the temperature can be unbearably high. The buildings are still there, the infrastructure is still there. These are very important to who we are as a state. This is, in general, when you look at the state of New Hampshire, this is a small amount of money. You average it out, it's less than $25,000 per year per fair. It is capped. The issue about Rochester, I think either the bill would have to be amended, or they might have, if they wanted to participate, might have to look at their structure to see that they qualified in order to be able to address those funds. That's the two paths I would see there. I certainly want to see them be eligible because that's the fair probably with the oldest buildings and needs the most infrastructure work.
Questions from the committee? Thank you.
Thank you.
Chairman Pearl.
Good morning again, and for the record, my name is Representative Howard Pearl, representing Merrimack 26. Again, I'm going to keep my testimony very short. I wanted to just come over and let you know that the Environment and Ag Committee looked at this on a policy level, not a funding level, and you did ask some very good questions on that, and I don't know the answer to that question either, whether they would be eligible or not. But we supported the bill 14-3 out of our committee as not to pass, and I would encourage you to do the same, as we felt that the fairs were a very important part of the agricultural aspect of New Hampshire, and received an awful lot of testimony about their significance with the 4-H and the future farmers and things of that nature, and some of the horse clubs, the various fairgrounds use them for different things. So I would encourage you to support this bill as well. So thank you.
Senator Guy.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Mr. Chairman, could you share, if you can, what the three people who opposed this bill, what their rationale was?
To the best of my ability, I certainly don't want to represent them, but my understanding was they weren't necessarily opposed to the policy of supporting the fair, but they felt there were other policies that we had not supported as a state and didn't know for sure why we should support this when we hadn't some others. That was my understanding.
Thank you very much.
You're welcome.
No further questions. Thank you very much.
You're very welcome. Enjoy the rest of your day.
You too.
Sorry about all the House bills. We did our best.
No.
Not as half as sorry as you're going to be.
Yeah. Oh dear. Okay, Robert Johnson. You're not a guitar player, are you?
No.
I'm sure you get that a lot, though, right?
No, you wouldn't want to hear me play the guitar, Mr.
New
Chair.
Hampshire Farm Bureau.
Yeah.
In support, wishing to speak.
Thank you. For the record, Rob Johnson, representing New Hampshire Farm Bureau as the Federation's policy director, and we are in support of House Bill 1584. Our fairs do a number of things. They provide affordable family entertainment, educate the public, expose livestock and how our food is grown to the public and all. But I think the most important thing they do is they showcase the skills and work of our youth. Fairs, no organization, nobody does it better than the fairs do in this respect. And that's why this bill and the fairs are important. It's already been touched on what the fairs rely on. Volunteers, are weather dependent. They have high cost insurance, law enforcement. They have older buildings and meeting code and all that. But what the bill does, it shows a commitment from the state, and it provides some seed money that can be leveraged for the fairs. Okay. And in closing, a few years back, the New Hampshire New Hampshire Business Magazine wrote a piece on this very issue, and I've got copies for the committee. And also, I've got packets of letters from 5 of our young farmers who are very passionate about the fairs and what they've done for them and what they've allowed them to do in their careers and such, and I'll provide those to you as well, and I'll leave it at that, Mr. Chair. Thank you.
Well done. Questions from the committee? Senator Guy.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Rob, in your capacity as head of the Farm Bureau, if you will, do you talk to other state Farm Bureau people from other states?
Certainly.
And do you got any indication of how they might fund their fairs? Any ideas that if you don't, maybe you could research?
I'd have to look, yeah, I'd have to look into it, so
Okay.
I got it.
Thank you.
I can.
Thank you very much. And my final speaker is Janelle. Welcome, Janelle. Did I say that right?
Yes, you did.
I
Thank
did.
you very much. My name is Janelle George. I'm a resident of Milford. And I also am here to just speak in support of this bill on behalf of the New Hampshire Fairs Association, as well as all 13 fairs and festivals that make up the fairs circuit in the state of New Hampshire. It's very important to the state on an economic level, on an agricultural level, on an educational level. I grew up in 4-H. My daughter's in 4-H. My husband's family was all through 4-H. And the fairs is where they have a chance to interact with the public and teach the public what they've learned with their animals, with their agriculture. Public speaking is a big part of it. And so just real quickly, big supporters of the fairs overall and especially of this bill. Thank you.
Well done. Questions from the committee? Good job.
Thank you.
I have nobody else here wishing to speak on this particular bill, so with that, we are going to close the hearing. I would entertain a motion to move into exec real quick, but we don't have Senator Perker to.
She's coming back.
Yeah, I'll wait till she comes back.
She's coming back.
If we're all here.
She's got students.
Yeah, all right. So the hearing is closed on that, and we're going to hear the next hearing on HB 478. Oh, a little behind. You have the floor, Representative. Thank you. And because we are running very shy of time, we're going to ask that the people wishing to speak on this really limit their get to the point.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman and members of the committee. I did provide my written testimony to the clerk, so if that could be distributed, that would be great, and that will outline my testimony today. For the record, my name is Maureen Mooney. I'm a state representative from the town of Merrimack. That's in Hillsborough County, district number 21. I'm the prime sponsor and in support of House Bill 478. You'll notice that the co-sponsors on this bill represent a great cross-section of legislators from both parties and in leadership in the House and from across the state, as well as in Merrimack. As means of some background, the bill passed in the House on a voice vote on January 6th, 2022. After an ITL motion failed, the vote was 139 to 212. I did also email all of you not only my testimony, but attachments, as well as 10 most frequently asked questions, I guess you could say, about the bill. That was emailed to you, I believe, Monday evening. The town of Merrimack, as I said earlier, has undergone what is considered the worst case of environmental pollution in the state's history. The town has spent now years reacting to this news of the effects of PFAS contaminants in clean air, drinking water, groundwater, wastewater, and soil. A detailed summation of that very history of our plight, starting in 2016, is found in this bill, in House Bill 478, in Section 1, Roman numerals 1 through 7. To give some background on my involvement in this bill, the late Speaker Dick Hinch of Merrimack asked that I work with the Merrimack Citizens for Clean Water on 2 legislative initiatives. As a result, I'm the prime sponsor of House Bill 478, and the Merrimack Citizens for Clean Water are fully supportive of the bill. In sum, the bill extends the operations and maintenance remedy in the March 2018 settlement agreement between the Merrimack Village Water District, otherwise known as the MVD, and St. Gobain Performance Plastics for Merrimack Village Water District, wells number 4 and number 5. That can be seen in the bill in Section 1, Roman 8. As it stands now, Such operations and maintenance costs will be paid by St. Gobain on wells 4 and 5 only through the year 2025, representing the first 5 years of the water treatment system operation that was installed in October of 2021. House Bill 478 calls for St. Gobain to, quote, pay all costs associated with the continued operation, monitoring, and maintenance and any necessary additional modifications thereto, and, quote, all additional incidental operation and maintenance costs of wells 4 and 5, beginning on October 27th, 2025, and continuing for so long as the Merrimack Village Water District treats water in wells 4 and 5 to comply with any existing or future water quality standards set for PFAS. Now, the October 2025 date is 5 years from the October 21, 2020, I stand corrected, 2020 activation of the granular activated carbon filtration system in wells 4 and 5. So that GAC filtration system installed in October of 2020, the maintenance for that system in wells 4 and 5 will be paid by St. Gobain only until 2025. The rationale for this bill. Number one, the town of Merrimack and surrounding areas believe in holding pollutants accountable, and this bill will accomplish that. Number two, the bill references an April 1st, 2016 letter from the Department of Environmental Services to St. Gobain, which I emailed to all of you on Monday, signed by the commissioner. In that letter, on page 3, the department formally requests St. Gobain to, quote, provide for the necessary long-term operation, maintenance, and monitoring of the installed treatment systems. In that letter, it was directed to St. Gobain, again, that they provide for the necessary long-term operation, maintenance, and monitoring of the installed treatment systems. That would go on for as long as we need the treatment systems, which I can assure you will be longer than the year 2025. Number 3 in rationale. The town of Merrimack and or the Merrimack Village Water District cannot incur costs in perpetuity to filter polluted water from an industrial polluter. Although DES derives its authority to enforce the April 1st, 2016 letter from RSA 485:C, or rather -C:3, DES has not taken enforcement action to do that. This bill will directly place the costs of operations, monitoring, and maintenance on the polluter, not the taxpayer, as DES had intended it to be in its April 1st, 2016 letter. In conclusion, we ask that you not look at this bill through the lens of over-regulation or state mandate. Rather, we ask that you envision the circumstance if this bill does not pass. If this bill does not pass, then at midnight on October 27, 2025, Merrimack citizens will be in the unprecedented position whereby MVD customers, that is, Merrimack citizens, will be forced to bear the costs to pay for a private industry's cleanup, while that very industry is allowed to continue polluting. This unfortunate scenario then results in an additional undue burden on Merrimack citizens and a precedent where citizens are forced to pay through the Merrimack Village Water District to prevent private pollution. Again, the Merrimack taxpayer bearing a burden to pay to prevent a private polluter from polluting. Please vote ought to pass on House Bill 478, and I thank you very much for your attention on this very important matter.
I will get to you, Senator Guider. I just have a real quick question while it's on the tip of my brain and I don't forget. On page 4, line 8, we addressed this issue, which it says that that the Attorney General shall seek such a remedy. Does the legislature have that authority to mandate what the Attorney General's office will do? And I'm going to couple that with one other statement. It seems to me that the courts had already settled this and that there might be a breach in what the court decision was. Doesn't this belong back in the courts for breach of contract?
Okay, thank you for those questions. With regards to the word shall, I know someone will be testifying after me with regards to that. I believe that that has been passed before out of the House, so I don't find an issue with that. I was asked to change it to may, as I recall, and I stuck with shall, and that's what passed out of the House.
Thank you.
There's that.
Any other question with regards to the courts, and then Senator Guider, you're up next. But it seems as though they came up with a decision. Maybe St. Cobain has not lived up to that decision, and there might be in breach. Are we interfering with the court's ruling in any way?
No, there was no court. This contract has not been litigated. The statute of limitations now has run.
Okay, thank you. Senator Guy.
I think we've had this discussion before. I'm concerned about legislating that which is more appropriately litigated. There's nothing that prevents the water district or the community from litigating against St. Cobain for, to, if you will, follow the letter from Tom Burek that assigns them the long-term liability. I'm reluctant. I understand fully, sympathetic, but I'm reluctant to start interjecting legislative action in something that's more appropriately done through litigation. I can't think of a jury in the state that would possibly say, you know, not guilty, so to speak. And so I'm concerned about that aspect.
Further questions from the committee? You want to comment on that?
If I could.
Yeah, of course.
Thank you for the question, and totally understandable. However, we are now in very different circumstances than the state has ever seen. That's first and foremost. Number two, it is not unusual for the state to direct agencies, departments, et cetera, to do certain things. For example, there was a bill not long ago sponsored by the late Rennie Cushing, I know, that regarding the Coakley landfill, and that bill directed the Department of Environmental Services and so forth to take action. A very unique circumstance, again, not to make a comparison, but to simply bring up something that's slightly familiar or similar. And then lastly, we are up against a statute of limitations situation. Several things have changed, circumstances have changed since that agreement was made in March of 2018. For example, the commissioners now are different. The standards have been upped. The estimated cost of maintaining the operation of those wells 4 and 5 has skyrocketed. Again, I dread for that October 2025 date when the Merrimack taxpayer will now have to bear that burden because of a private polluter. So that would be my response.
Thank you, Representative, for your testimony. We appreciate it.
Thank you.
Senator Gary Daniels, in strong support, wishing to speak. I know he had a very similar bill to address this issue, but he's here wishing to speak in favor. Senator, welcome to our committee.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, members of the committee. For the record, my name is Gary Daniels. I'm a state senator in District 11, representing the towns of Amherst, Merrimack, Milford, and Wilton. I appear before you today in support of and co-sponsor of House Bill 478. I'm a big advocate for business because businesses are the vehicles to produce jobs and make prosperity possible for all New Hampshire citizens. So I don't take my testimony lightly. While I advocate for business, I do so expecting that those businesses will operate in a proper and responsible way, including the treatment of their employees, and taking the initiative to ensure that no harm is done to the environment in the production of the products they make or the services they offer. I support this bill because my constituents in Merrimack have suffered harm from contaminants created by Saint-Gobain in the manufacturing of its products. And secondly, because the company has not mitigated nor in a timely manner responsibly addressed the pollution it has created and the harm that it has done to the Merrimack community. Because of the inaction of Saint-Gobain, including its rebuff of the Merrimack Town Council to uphold its responsibilities, I find it therefore necessary for this legislature to hold Saint-Gobain accountable for rectification of the damage it has brought upon the community. And I therefore ask for your support for ought to pass on House Bill 478.
Thank you, Senator, for your strong support and for representing your community. Are there questions from the committee? Senator Gray.
I look at the settlement agreement. I see the signatures, on this side of the page. Why isn't this bill considered a modification to that settlement agreement and not the privy of the legislature, since all of the parties agreed?
I can't speak directly. I think Representative Mooney has talked some about that. I mean, I followed some of the town council proceedings and going, and I mean, what's disturbing about this is the length of time and the dragging the feet that it's taking to do the things that they are supposed to do in a timely manner. So I think it's just that, we're done trying to work with the thing, and it seems like the only appropriate response is to go to the legislature to force something to be done so that we can get past the situation.
Follow up.
But there, I go back to what Senator Guida said, that if they're not doing these things in a timely manner, they're in breach of the contract, and that since the court was the one who accepted the settlement agreement, I believe, that the court has jurisdiction over anyone who's in breach of it.
I don't know that I can fully answer your question, Senator. It is alarming that, that a town would have, after a court decision, that a town would have to spend more money, more taxpayer money, to go and take the polluter to court to try to get done what's right.
Senator Guida.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Can't DES enforce sanctions against Saint-Gobain for violation of a contract to which I don't know if DES is a party to it, but I'm sure they had a voice in it. But don't we have rules and regulations in place enabling that agency to then pursue violators of the pollution standards?
I can't speak for DES except to say we have been waiting for over 2 years for DES and Fish and Game to get their act together so that we can open up property and continue an operation in Milford. So I don't consider that timely.
Thank you.
Thank you, Senator. Seeing no further questions. Alan Brooks from the Attorney General's office. And maybe before you start off, I would like to ask you a couple of questions and then just bring it into your testimony as well. I did bring up the question of shall and may on page 4, and I'd like you to address that as well as, is there any enforcement from the Attorney General's office to make sure that some of these contracts that were signed and agreed upon, where's the enforcement? Where's the teeth in that? If they signed it and they're not living up to it, as Senator Daniels did bring up the issue, well, who's pushing the string? I mean, why can they get away with not living up to their contract, and why does it cost the taxpayers more money to have to relitigate? And I'm sorry for that mouthful, but that's, while it's fresh on my brain, and I lose it in a minute. So now you have the floor.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Again, Alan Brooks from the Department of Justice. Thank you for both of those questions. The question of shall versus may, we believe there is a separation of powers issue with that, and if that, and that is on line 8, page 4, and if that would change to may, that would remedy that problem. It was passed earlier in a bill related to landfill. Both myself and Attorney General McConnell testified in opposition to that measure, and our office does so again. With respect to your broader question, that is a private agreement between Merrimack Village District and St. Cobain. So it's not a state agreement. We were not involved in the negotiation. We were actually asked to step aside.
Can you turn your mic on?
Oh, yeah, thank you.
Thank you.
I didn't even notice that. I apologize.
Thank you. So we were not a party to that negotiation for that agreement. That is a private agreement. And my understanding is not that St. Cobain is not fulfilling the terms of that agreement, but that Merrimack Village District doesn't like the terms of that agreement. They want a new agreement. And that's up to them if they can negotiate with that with St. Cobain. If they have some legal argument that should overturn the agreement that they have, they can make those. I can't speak to what they ought to do in that. I can't give them legal advice. But that is my understanding. It's not that that agreement has anything to do with the state, and it is not that St. Cobain is not living up to it. But I believe that the people who live there feel that that agreement is not going to provide them everything that they need going forward.
Can the state bring a lawsuit against St. Cobain?
The state and DES specifically has sent a letter to St. Cobain saying, how will you meet your operation and maintenance agreements for wells 4 and 5 going forward for as long as that is needed? That agreement is something that they have pointed to and said, we're going to live up to this agreement. DES does not have to accept that. I will point out that my understanding is part of the issue with that agreement is there's actually an indemnity provision where Merrimack Village District, this is St. Cobain's take on this, so I'm not saying that I've reasoned this out for myself. They have replied and said that indemnity agreement actually means that even if you state make us pay for operation and maintenance, that we look to Merrimack Village District to pay us back. But we have not yet accepted that. DES has not accepted that, and I believe that there will be further correspondence from DES on that issue.
So the state could, does this vehicle help the state step in to this situation, or is there another remedy that the state could do to mitigate this problem?
The state will use its own authority, and it does have authority to say to St. Cobain, provide operation and maintenance. If anything, that agreement complicates that because there's this contractual relationship outside of our regulatory authority, and that's among the parties to decide for themselves how that's going to impact that.
But the state is not privy in part of this contract and therefore not obligated one way or another.
Correct.
The town of Merrimack cannot obligate the state to abide by anything, neither can St. Cobain. So we can step in somehow, if we can find a vehicle to do so, in order to make them comply.
Again, I believe we already have the authority to request that, but the way in which this existing agreement complicates that and who will actually pay at the end of the day, it's now very hard to untangle because of that agreement.
Senator Guy, do you have a question?
So the existing agreement essentially turns off St. Cobain's payment 3.5 years from now.
Correct.
Is there sufficient time between now and then to allow the legislature to act if it chooses to do so, while still enabling legal processes to move forward, whether DES does it or whether in a private action by the water district or the community?
My understanding is it's exactly as you've stated, which is that there is time between now and then. Currently, operation and maintenance is occurring for the treatment, and it continues for three years and some change.
Thank you.
Senator Perkins-Coker.
Thank you, Chair. I'm trying to decide if, I have questions about the interpretation of this agreement because I think they're relevant to what the private remedies are, but would you believe that we already directed those questions to the court for an opinion, which to my mind remains relevant to understanding this issue. And so I don't have any questions from the Attorney General's office at this time. But I do, these questions about how the indemnity function remain outstanding from my perspective.
Further questions? And do you have more testimony that you'd like to bring, or did we exhaust it all?
That's all for me. Thank you.
We really appreciate you being here. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chair.
And Christian Koch from the BIA opposes and wishes to speak.
Good morning, Mr. Chair, members of the committee. For the record, my name is Kirsten Koch, and I represent the Business and Industry Association. Sure. So I'm here today to express BIA's strong opposition to House Bill 478. This bill may seem familiar to you. It's identical to Senate Bill 341, which the Senate tabled earlier this year. 478 challenges both the state and federal constitution. We do have constitutional concerns there. In the efforts to save time, I did submit written testimony. Attached to that is a letter from a constitutional law expert further detailing that. But our concerns are that settlement agreements, if this bill passed, would no longer be a trusted solution in New Hampshire. And that could either discourage businesses from doing business in the Granite State or force companies to always choose to go through the costly and lengthy litigation process in order to ensure finality through the judicial system, because they would be concerned that anytime they enter into a settlement agreement, that it would no longer be a final solution if one side could just go to the legislature and change the agreement at any time in the future when they decide they no longer like the terms that they already agreed to. So with that, BIA respectfully asks the committee to find House Bill 478 inexpedient to legislate. We believe it's an unconstitutional bill and it would be hurtful to the business community.
Does the BIA, thank you for your testimony, if the state came in and said, look, you're polluting our state, regardless of the contracts that you made, would BIA be opposed to us addressing that issue?
Well, I think it's up to the expertise of DES and the state to determine what's happening in the situation and look at the facts and make the proper determination.
Well said. Thank you. Any further questions? Seeing none.
Thank you.
Representative Rung, I think I have you as the last speaker, and I'm going to be rude and ask you, just please get to the meat of what you have to say.
Thank you very much, Senator, and I'll try to keep this brief. I did provide written testimony by email, and I have it printed out. For the record, my name is Rosemary Rung, and I am a state representative for Hillsborough 21, which encompasses the town of Merrimack. We've been talking a lot about the legal parameters, the specifics, the responsibilities of the legislator, the courts, but I want to provide the perspective of somebody who lives in Merrimack, who was drinking that water since 1983 and who was completely stunned when it was discovered that our water contained PFOA at a phenomenal level beyond what EPA's health recommendation was. At that time, the MVD, and up until that time, the Merrimack Village District was 5 volunteers from the community that looked over our municipal water system. And one of them was the late Representative Jack Balcom, who many of you know. And when that contamination was discovered, which is the largest industrial contamination that the state of New Hampshire has ever experienced, the town was desperate. We were frantic to begin to clean up the water. Our first priority was the health and safety of our people. So the MVD commissioners entered into this agreement with Saint-Gobain, who at that time already had information about a similar contamination they had created in Hoosick Falls, New York, which they are paying 100% of the maintenance operations. But we were so desperate to get something in, the MVD commissioners put together a plan, and they thought 5 years was adequate. Since that agreement, it's become very, very clear that PFAS aren't going to go away. This cleanup is going to last for decades. And also, the parameters of the consent decree that DES entered into with Saint-Gobain is also essentially invalid because the outer boundary that's defined in that has already been exceeded into Londonderry. There are many families that are impacted with contaminated water that aren't included in that consent decree. Now, I also chair the HB 737 commission that looks at the environmental health impacts of PFAS contamination from Saint-Gobain. And we have approved a letter that's going to DES and the CEO of Saint-Gobain to renegotiate the consent decree area. So, because we need to broaden that outer boundary so that it captures the people that we know certainty are suffering from that contamination. We may find out in 5 or 10 years it has to be expanded again. So when that initial agreement was made, because there was no authority, I would say, by DES to act immediately to call for that cleanup, I don't think Granite Staters should only have to go through lengthy and extremely expensive court action to get justice, especially justice that impacts their lives, the lives of their children. A cancer report that was released by DHHS late last year found that Merrimack suffers over twice the rate of kidney cancer. We also have breast cancer. Renal cancers are also way above average. So I just want you to understand what the human motivation and response was to this contamination. If we lived in a perfect state, we're close, but if we had a perfect state, DES would have immediately gone in there, shut down Saint-Gobain, demanded they work immediately to provide bottled water and to clean up all of the municipal and the private wells that they had polluted. In a perfect world, that wouldn't happen. We're trying to reach that perfection through this bill. I mean, we know we're not going to get there, but we're trying to move toward justice. And so I do respectfully ask that you support this bill and bring some relief to the people of Merrimack.
Thank you for your
Thank
testimony.
you.
Question?
I do, Chair.
Yes.
I'm sorry. I appreciate you being here, Representative, and I very much appreciate the spirit in which you're offering this, and I think we are all solutions-oriented here in the room. So just 2 questions that would be informationally helpful. One is, has the town of Merrimack considered whether, the Water Village District signing this agreement, whether that's binding on the town itself, or whether it's just binding on the water district, or whether there are other parties that might be plaintiffs with damages?
Yeah, my understanding, well, that agreement was only between Merrimack Village District because the town of Merrimack is actually a separate political entity. So that was only between MVD and Saint-Gobain. And Senator Perkins-Cook, I forget your second question. I'm sorry.
Just has there been discussion in the spirit that you're talking about, to try to find a solution to this problem about whether there are other plaintiffs with damages outside of Merrimack Village District?
Yes, there could be. Those citizens that are in Londonderry that are outside the outer boundaries, certainly they do have some, they can seek relief in the courts. I do know there are some private class action suits with people in Merrimack who are seeking Saint-Gobain. And that litigation began 2017, maybe 2018. There's no light at the end of the tunnel yet. So you can imagine the desperation on the part of MVD, because if we had gone to the courts right away, we'd probably still be in the courts. We wouldn't have any filtration systems addressing the water now. So, that's a tough thing, because we look to the courts as often a solution, but many times they are a problem for these small village districts and small people. It's overwhelming to seek remedies through them. but we are people's legislation. We're all essentially volunteers with a generous mileage allowance, but we are still volunteers, and I feel an incredible responsibility as a representative of Merrimack to stick up for those people who just don't have the resources to do it themselves. I'm trying to get that done, and so is Representative Mooney and all the representatives from Merrimack, Bedford, Litchfield, Londonderry. We all are looking for the New Hampshire General Court to help us with this.
So we got a lot of bills left.
Okay, thank
and
you.
I got to go to another committee, and so I don't want to be rude, but is there any more questions? I have one more question, and then I'm going to close the hearing on this. Senator Gaida.
Thank you. Would you be amenable to, or would the sponsor be amenable to legislation that directs DES to take action and to enforce penalties, which they're empowered to do, in significant amounts, for failure to comply with standards going forward in the existing wells that are contaminated and the other wells that are becoming discovered as this area expands? Rather than legislate an interference into a negotiated agreement, which I think is fraught with constitutional peril, I'd be much more inclined to direct the agency responsible for cleaning up and assessing pollution and its damage to do something. Would that be something you'd be amenable to drafting as an amendment?
I would certainly have that discussion with Senator Mooney. I mean, we're looking for a solution. And when you mentioned, Senator Gaida, about the regulated compounds, one of the problems we're seeing with this filtration plant for wells 4 and 5 is that there's other PFAS breaking through that aren't regulated. And they're making those filters expire much sooner than we had expected them to. So one of the things that's really tough working on this issue is it's playing whack-a-mole. As soon as you're addressing some PFAS, some other ones are emerging. So thank you.
You have another bill coming right next.
Yeah,
right?
do you want me to just stay here?
Yes. Yeah, so I'm closing the hearing, opening up another hearing. And I apologize to my peers that have to be at other committees, which I have to be at as well. So.
Are you returning?
No, I'm going to get finished through this. So HB 1185. So just for the record, so people are watching in my angst, the House has sent over a ton of bills that we have to get through in a very, very, very short amount of time. And it's put us in a crunch. And I think it hurts the ability for people to testify because of this crunch. And I want to give everybody a fair chance to speak. But in the brevity of, I'm going to ask people to respect that, because we still got to hear in HHS and in other builds, we're crunched. And I don't want to be disrespectful, but I really want people to get through their testimony succinctly, to the point, so that it makes sense. So with that, Representative Rung, you're recognized.
Thank you very much, Senator Everett. And just for the record, I'm Rosemary Rung, State Representative for Hillsborough 21, which encompasses the town of Merrimack. I'm bringing forth HB 1185, which would allow, it's enabling legislation, which would allow municipalities the authority to regulate PFAS in discharges that are brought into their plant. Currently, there is in statute in RSA 149-1:6. It does give municipalities the authority to adopt ordinances related to their wastewater treatment facilities and to find violations of such ordinances. What we found in Merrimack when we've done this for Saint-Gobain is it's being challenged as that RSA is being too vague, that we need to be more specific in the types of compounds, materials that are being regulated. So this would just enable those municipalities to specify PFAS. It's also addressing PFAS as more of a class rather than looking at or regulating specific compounds. It's giving us the authority to look at any PFAS compounds that go beyond those that are currently regulated by DES, essentially those 4. The reason this is incredibly important is because, as you know, and this gets to some of the questions, Senator Everett, you asked before, PFAS is not treated in a municipal wastewater system. It does not break down through the biological means of a tertiary system. So what goes in is going out. And in Merrimack's situation, it goes out to the Merrimack River, if it's in the effluent, or it goes into the sludge, the biosolids. Now, Merrimack has a very, very sophisticated and successful composting facility. In fact, we take sludge and/or waste from the following communities. Franklin, that's a state plant in Franklin, Jaffrey, Hooksett, Hollis, Amherst, Brookline, Mount Vernon, Lineborough, Wilton, Mason, Bristol, Henniker, Milford, Sunapee, and Winchester, in addition to the waste that we generate within our town. This waste, some of it comes as wastewater, some of it comes as sludge, but what we do is we treat it, the compost, the biosolids are composted, and we sell that as a soil amendment to many municipal parks, golf courses throughout New England. Having PFAS in our compost is very, very dangerous for us because it will likely prevent our ability to compost sludge because we won't be able to get rid of it. All those communities I mentioned will now have to take the responsibility of treating their sludge. There are millions and millions of dollars at stake here, not just by Merrimack, but by all these communities. If they now have to treat their sludge, we need to be able to keep that compost facility operating, and in doing so, we need to be able to control the PFAS coming into the plant. So this bill will allow us to do that. It also has a side effect because if companies are not able to send their discharge to Merrimack because of the PFAS, it will incentivize them to decrease the PFAS that they're wasting. They could either find a substitute product or they could raise efficiencies in their operations so less is going down the drain.
Specific to the bill, please.
Okay, yeah. And the other thing is, as far as the cost, when this came before the House committee, it was amended to remove the requirement of residential septic haulers. We had received testimony that was really an undue burden upon them. It would severely impact their business. And so this bill removes that. So we're only looking at commercial industrial septage that's coming from industrial commercial sources, but it still allows municipalities to test the septage coming in if it is from residential, just to track that.
Thank you very much for your testimony. Any questions from the committee? Seeing none.
Great, thank you.
Kristen Koch, not wishing to speak. Opposed from BIA. Rosemary Rung, Rep. Mooney left the room. And not wishing to speak, but in support. Terry Woods from New Hampshire Department of wishes to speak, and non-committal. Is she in here? Yeah. Oh, Tracy, I apologize. That's all right. No, I got bad eyes. Do you have written testimony? I do. Okay, so if you could just... I will be trying to do 4 sentences or less. How's that? That works. After my mom. Thank you for allowing me. Your microphone? Press the mic. Thank you.
Okay. Just very briefly, is that this legislation, as alluded to in the previous testimony, is... Oh, sorry. Tracy, I'm trying to be so brief. Tracy Wood, Administrator of the Wastewater Engineering Bureau for the New Hampshire Department of Environmental Services. Thank you for allowing me to testify today. So, just in very brief, the bill, as it exists, there's another statute that already exists that was alluded to in the previous testimony, RSA 149I6, which allows municipalities the authority to adopt ordinances and bylaws related to their wastewater treatment facility. In this, it's broad. It gives a lot of flexibility for communities to put into their sewer use ordinances anything that they feel necessary to ensure proper operation of their wastewater treatment facility. So in short, we feel that this legislation is duplicative and not necessary. If you're going to continue forth with this legislation, we would ask that you consider other compounds besides PFAS and consider all pollutants.
Well done. Questions from the committee? Senator Waters.
Yeah, thank you, Sharon. Thank you. So it does appear this is unnecessary, but I did have one question on the second page. Approved septic facility. Do you have any concern that we might get to the point where no septic facility will accept materials if there's PFAS in them?
I mean, if it's left up to each individual municipality, then yes, that could happen.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you. All right, thank you,
Thank
and
you.
I have nobody else wishing to speak. Want to talk? No? Okay, closing the hearing. Done. All right, I do want to accept one bill that I have time for, that we were waiting for Senator Perkins Polka. And this had to do with the HB 1584, and it had to do with, this bill establishes capital improvement grant money to benefit the state agricultural affairs. Is there a motion on the particular bill? Wait, is there a motion moving to exec?
So,
Okay, all in favor? Aye. Any opposed? Seeing none. HB 1584, is there a motion on the bill?
I'll second it, and I have one
Discussion?
question, yes. I do think that if we get to finance, we can get some language, if needed, about them qualifying for charitable gain, and that's the place to do it, and the finance committee will be.
Yes, remember Rob Johnson's gonna bring us in.
Yeah.
He's gonna bring us in information for how other states might be funding this thing.
Yeah, well, most of them are just doing a general fund thing, but they also have pari-mutuel vetting in a lot of
Fairs
places
are
too.
also, a lot of them are county-based
Yeah.
too. And that's another
Yeah.
thing I'm thinking about in terms of the funding.
So, for Senator Gray, I mean, so anyways, we can get it over there and those things we addressed. But I wondered, Senator Gray, whether here, you mentioned that perhaps, is the Rochester Fair not a member of the Association of Fairs?
I don't know. I don't think that you should hold the bill up for that. There were, as I understand it, special provisions made back at the turn of the century about Rochester, and it is quasi, well, it's part corporation and part charitable organization, but I don't think they do anything. There's tax implications in the city of Rochester that are being litigated.
Right.
So again, I don't know that there's any way that you can do anything other than what's in the bill right now, and I don't believe it should hold up.
Okay,
You
yeah,
know,
because I just thought, we could say any member in good standing of the New Hampshire Association of Fairs and then name the Fair Association, but if it seems like that necessary, get done in finance as well.
Okay.
And maybe they are a member of the association, I mean.
and I just don't know.
Yeah, okay. Well, that can get fixed over there too.
All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Seeing none, is there a motion? Consent. Okay, is there a second? What?
Second.
We're not doing consents? Nope. We can't do consent?
It's gotta go to finance.
What?
It's gotta go to finance.
Well, of all the bills next week, why have it on the floor? We can send things we can put things on consent that go to finance.
Everything was,
It's up to you, I just thought Grant had already talked to you, because we were,
about nothing going on consent?
yeah, for the next week's calendar, because it's going out this afternoon.
I thought everything go on consent.
That's what I was understanding. Well,
Well,
motion
maybe
is,
it's the problem of getting the blurb in the calendar in time.
It's up to you, I thought Grant had already talked to you.
no. We'll withdraw the motion for consent and we'll have somebody take it out. Who would like to take this out? Seeing how you're on. You want
Well,
to take?
Senator Gray's got a fair.
Yeah.
I got a fair.
You got a fair.
So this is an immoral committee. You have an affair?
I said,
Senator Gray.
ain't fair.
Oh.
Fair in the middle, yeah.
Senator Gray, would you like to take this out?
I'll take it out.
All right, thanks. All right. Motion to move out of exec.
So moved.
Second, all in favor, say aye. Aye. We're done. So we didn't get much more time, but whatever.
If you have a second, just one word.
We have 116 bills, education, or one
I know, that's all coming here?
That's
Oh,
because
no,
you
we
did.
killed over half of them.
Oh, thank you. It wasn't enough,
On
we're gonna kill the rest of them.
the last resort area, yeah, I finally had a chance to talk to